For 2 days in July 1997, Australians held our collective breath as we watched as from the rubble of the landslide at Thredbo, one survivor was found. We all watched it on live news as that man, Stuart Diver, was pulled from the wreckage of a landslide that had claimed the lives of 17 people, including his wife, Sally. Stuart's injuries were not serious and he soon recovered, and he went on to later on remarry and have a child. But tragically, his second wife, Rosanna, later also died of cancer. And so for this man, the thing most of us would fear the most, losing someone we love, losing our spouse, had happened to him twice before the age of 50. And yet, when journalist Leigh Sales followed him up years later for her book Any Given Day to ask how he coped, one of the questions she asked was to say, does this make you scared? Does it make you scared of falling in love? Does it make you scared of living your life for fear that another person might die? And he said, no, because there is no end to the reservoir of love available in relationships, and it is worth the love it's worth the great benefit of love for the small risk that we might lose someone again. What a great attitude around a potential fear that so many of us, I think, would have. There are, I think, two kinds of fear. The fear that keeps us safe and the fear that holds us back. The fear that keeps us safe is the fear that makes us look both ways before crossing the road, that makes us drive carefully and watch for oncoming traffic. It's the kind of fear that makes sports people, when they go to scuba dive or rock climb or do something potentially dangerous, to check all their ropes and their gauges at least twice. That kind of fear we actually have to teach children, to be scared of putting their hand on the hot plate, to be scared of running out in the middle of the road. And that kind of fear keeps us safe. But that's clearly not the kind of fear Jesus is talking about when he tells us in the gospel today, do not be afraid. In this one short passage we hear today, Jesus tells us 3 times, do not fear, don't be afraid, do not be scared. And in fact, the command, don't be afraid, is a couple of 100 times throughout the whole Bible. It's a really important message God wants us to know, to not be afraid. But what is it he doesn't want us to be afraid of? And what Jesus doesn't want us to be scared of is the things that can hold us back. For Stuart, the temptation to be scared of a relationship, to be held back from ever falling in love again because of the risk of being hurt, would be an easy temptation. And I imagine it is for many of us. We often face fears, a fear of a relationship, a fear of trying to be creative, trying to stand up, trying to lead, trying to work for justice, for fear of what others might think of us or say to us. It's an easy temptation to fall prey to, I think. But to that, Jesus says, do not be afraid, do not fear. And in the context of today's gospel, Jesus is saying that around standing up to proclaim his message. But how? How do we avoid fear? Well, I think part of what we can learn from is the prophet Jeremiah we hear in the first reading, where Jeremiah talks about the really quite incredible situation he's in, where his proclaiming of the message of God brings him such opposition that people are threatening to kill him. And Jeremiah goes through a bit of a litany of woes, but then says, but I do not fear because the Lord is at my side as a dread warrior. And that really is the answer. How do we not fear? It is because we have God with us, at our side, and indeed for us as Christians with the Spirit in us. St. Paul would later say, if with God on our side, who can be against us? He asks it as a rhetorical question, but the literal answer is everyone. God can be on our side, everyone can be against us, but God is still on our side. God is still with us, and so we don't have to fear. If my worth, if my life entirely depends on what other people think of me or what I make of myself, then yes, there is much in the balance. But if I can trust that my worth, my dignity, my value, and the very person I am comes because of God's love for me, God's choosing of me, God's presence in my life, then I do not need to be afraid. I don't need to be afraid of the risk of relationships, the risk of leadership, the risk of proclaiming the Christian message, the risk of working for justice. Yes, all those things carry potential that we may get hurt. But nonetheless, like Stewart Dive, we can say there is no end to the reservoir of love that we can have, in our case from God, so there is no need to be afraid. So whenever we encounter those beautiful words in the Bible or perhaps in a hymn, do not be afraid or fear not, let's remember why we don't have to fear. Because God is on our side and God is with us.